So this is the final creation of my displacement map within Cinema 4D, for Cinema 4D, sorry. So currently I'm creating a displacement map inside of Illustrator, and this will be used to go into the displacement channel of the material, which will be on the cube, on the abstract cube. The reason why I'm working in Illustrator is because it's a vector program, so I can scale it up or scale it down to any size and it won't rasterize. That's probably one of the main benefits of using it over Photoshop. So within the program, I'm basically creating a map which will displace certain aspects of the object. So you can see I'm working in black and white, and that's basically like binary, it's either on or off. So whenever the map is used inside a cinema, it'll create protrusions where the black is, and then the white will stay the same. You'll actually see a bit later on that I layer this up and put it into, I turn the opacity down and layer it up to create more levels or different values. When I actually turn the opacity down, the black turns to grey and it becomes more grayscale. So you not only have really dark values, you also have really dark values, you have white as the two extremes of the spectrum, and then you also have the ones which are singularly layered up, so they'll just be a kind of light grey, and then there'll also be darker shades of grey, which will further add another element of diversity and also another level on the shape when it's in the 3D program. So within the software now, I'm basically creating a shape or creating a pattern, duplicating it, and then basically like cutting it out from each other to create lots of different patterns. I'm sticking to 90-degree intersects, I guess. This is to keep with like the geometric theme. As I'm using a cube, I kind of really wanted a geometric pattern. So having a cube at a 45-degree angle wouldn't suit up to the rest of it, because it's all in 90-degree orientation. The artboard size as well is 8,000 pixels by 8,000, so it's pretty much 8K. This will basically give me lots and lots of detail as it'll be scaled down to the cube size. I think the default cube inside of Cinema 4D is 200 centimeters cubed, so 8,000 pixels down to 200 centimeters will give me lots of different levels and different bits of geometry when it's added in there. So I think, as I said before, this would be put into the displacement channel within the material, and that will again displace the different grayscale values whenever I turn it down. So this part of the creation of the map was fairly boring, I guess. It's very tedious at the start. It's a very slow process, but then once it starts to get going, so you can see on the screen now, once I create that one section, I'm able to progress up more rapidly with creating different and more different sections. It's just one of those things with the displacement map creation, and I found that with the very first one as well. The main reason why I'm creating a new one instead of using the old one is because the old one I felt had too many fine details, and that was mainly due to a number of factors. One, the initial layer, the initial first layer was very complex, and I went a lot smaller than the shapes that you can see on the artboard currently. And I think that was one of the negative things, because whenever that was put into Side of Cinema, the shape couldn't handle it. There weren't enough segments that I could add to the cube, because you can only add 1,000 segments, which sounds like quite a lot, and it definitely slowed my computer down. But in terms of all of those fine details, there's 1,000 segments to protrude those shapes, and I found that wasn't enough. So that's the main reason for me creating this new one now. I did make a conscious effort not to go too small, and I feel that on some of them I did go a bit small, and I tried to make a good effort not to do that. So as you can see, I'm just creating lots of random shapes and basically cookie cutting them out from each other. As well, I'm using the direct selection tool to select key parts within the shape that's already been created. And I also do a lot of right-click, transform, and I'm rotating it a lot, and mirroring it. So although there is like similar elements, it's not visually the same, and you'd really have to look quite closely to see that that is like the similar element that's being used. So there's just a good example there. Just trying to create lots of key features that I think I'd find quite good, or would find quite interesting to see on the cube. One kind of issue that I sort of had with this was trying to create something. You'll see in the second layer that I start to make that the kind of visual style of this displacement map is a bit different. So within this, it seems to be quite a recurring feature of squares, two squares being put like overlapping on the corners, and then being cut out from each other, and it's very square. Like the geometry of it is very square-like. And I think with the other one as well, the second one wasn't too different. However, it was less. I'd use less squares and more rectangles, I feel. I feel as well it gets to a certain point where we can only add so many things before it starts to get cluttered, because as well as trying to make a conscious effort as not to go too small, I was also trying to think of the other layer, and then whenever I turn the opacity down, as the opacity makes them both semi-translucent, or transparent, sorry, I was trying to make a conscious effort as not to make it too detailed, because I wanted the other one to add different values to it as well, and different characteristics. As well, the tutorial that I followed for this, I learned this method through a tutorial, and I followed that pretty much step by step. So on that, the creator took a kind of different method. He created a shape, then duplicated it, and then duplicated it further, and then just carried on working off that one shape. I kind of went away from the book on that part, and just made one section and then created a whole different set instead of using that already pre-created, duplicating it, transforming it, and then extracting it, or getting rid of the intersecting parts again. So this is the beginning of the second layer that I started to create, and with this one, whenever the creator of the other one started to make theirs, they kind of made a similar pattern. They had a long bar and lots of little squares. And before earlier, I said that I tried to go with a different style with this second layer, with more rectangular shapes instead of them being predominantly squares like last time. This here is a good example of what I meant as to what the creator did with his. He created one shape, duplicated it, further rotated and reflected the shape to make it a bit different. However, so he was basically making it all similar. I felt that this was quite good. Kind of gives it a more geometric or technology kind of aesthetic to it, I feel. And going back with the subdividing stuff again. So I'm just scaling it up and creating more diverse shapes again. I feel that this was actually quite a lot harder to make than the first one. I said the first one's a bit difficult to make, but I feel like this second one was a lot harder because again, starting from over again, having to start from scratch, start from a smaller piece, then working up and then gradually building more. And I think that's kind of reflected in the screen right now because I just duplicated one half and then trying to make it a bit diverse quite quickly. I actually quite like the bottom half compared to the top. I'm not quite sure why. I think the parts aren't too small. You see there, I'm actually trying to make it a bit more different at the top because I thought the bars were too big. I still think they're too big. So just currently trying to fill the top section, sticking again with the rectangular theme. The first time when I did it, so just commanding, duplicating them all the way down, and then I wasn't too worried about getting rid of the overlapping sections because I know I could just cut them out from each other. Again, overlaying with different things, different objects, trying to make it a bit more different, a bit more diverse. Duplicating the bottom one, as I said before, I quite like the bottom pattern. However, a lot of it will overlap with the bottom section, so I had to use the direct selection tool to get rid of it, get rid of the excess on the side, and then fill it into the gap. So that was quite different, and also getting rid of the overhanging bits there with the direct selection tool, making it fit so it looks quite nicely. Rotating it and just adjusting it again like usual. So as you can see, I've nearly finished the displacement map, and I've got, this was actually quite weird. So I copied and pasted part of the map from the top and dragged it down to the bottom, and because I didn't want any more of it to overlap with the top section, because the middle portion is actually quite small, I had this overhanging bit at the bottom, and I tried getting rid of it with the direct selection tool, but that didn't work. It kind of messed up with the shapes. So what I've done now is I've enabled both layers, turned the opacity down to 30%, and you can really see the overlapping. There's a part that I didn't do in the first test run that I did, which was add colour, which I've done here. I added a blue and an orange. And you can really see how the overlapping creates those three different levels. I've just saved it and exported it. Now I'm jumping into After Effects and further editing it. So just importing the footage as we go, dragging it down into the new comp, and then you can further see that this is the map that I created. Key to note that this is still an Illustrator file, and I do, which is very lucky because I do a couple things where I duplicate it and basically enlarge it. And I didn't know this before, but the second icon in, you've got the name, and then the second icon is a kind of star. That is the main function that I used whenever I scaled it up, because it's a vector. It shouldn't rasterize, and I didn't realize that was what it did, and that's quite handy. Just before, I added a grey background at 128% or value for each, so you can currently see that there's a lot going on. So I've got the solid grey backgrounds, I've got the adjustment layer which added a curves to, and there we can fully see the diverse range of what's going on. So you've got the yellow, you've got the light grey, you've got the blue, and then you've also got the areas where the blue overlaps with the yellow, and also where the blue overlaps with the grey. And I feel that adds a fourth dimension or fourth element to it. So this is where things get more interesting with the map. So I've duplicated the displacement map, and you can see there that it's laying central. I've scaled it down, and here I'm just trying to make a mask to let it feather in a lot easier compared to the rest of it, because it's just a solid square. So I'm trying to make it feather in and match in a lot nicer. However, I didn't do that very well. I just created like a shape, but basically that allows it to blend in a lot easier, especially as it's overlaid over the top. So I finally got it to work properly. Yeah, and I feel you can see there that it blends in a lot nicer now compared to what it used to. You used to be able to see quite a defined edge, or quite a dense dark spot where the second map was laying over the top of the main one. So now I'm just duplicating the smaller layer and spreading them around the less compacted areas. So I've duplicated a lot. I'm changing the angles, still sticking to the 90-degree increments again, and I decided to put them on the corners because that's where I felt I had less interesting islands and shapes going on. So I've also just created another one, scaled this up to 200% now, so it's double the size of the artboard, and I've just enabled the special icon to stop it rasterizing, adding more curves to it to further bring the contrast. Being quite careful, I don't want it to be super overexposed. However, I want to get a good broad range of colours. That's why I'm experimenting with the SCurve, and that's going to do it. You can see in the map there, it's quite broad range of light values and dark values, especially with the grey, and then the dark blues whenever they overlap. The last thing I'm going to experiment with now is changing the smaller scaled layers. So in the top left, top right, and bottom left, and changing the colours. As you can see as well, as it's an Illustrator file, whatever changes I make within the Illustrator application, it will seamlessly update. So I darken the blue a little bit, turn it into a bit more of a teal. I'm adding a fill effect and changing it to a burnt orange-ish, which I feel adds quite nice contrast. The actual colour palette itself there is quite nice. If anything, I probably would have liked to have adjusted the blue up a bit more, make it a bit more bright, a bit more vibrant. However, I feel that the orange added into that adds a lot of nice contrast, especially with the blue and orange. And then the yellow adds just a nice touch. This all as well is adding lots of different contrast elements. So here I'm just adding a fourth section to the other corner. But this then again is adding more displacement values to it. So if you're actually able to zoom in, be able to see that it's not only adding on to like the greys, it's adding to the yellows and adding that extra layer as well. Just turn the opacity down as well, and that's going to do it. Exporting it as a PNG or JPEG image. As unfortunately, I actually rendered out a whole load of them because I didn't select current frame. But sticking with full settings, 8000 by 8000, I should have changed the custom end and start point just to export one frame, but it still didn't take too long, and that was fine. It's the custom JPEG settings, all fine. Final lightening of the color of the blue, that's quite nice, and then saving it out.